The audio pages presents Whispers Beneath the Cross. When Love Meets the Shadows of Faith. Written by Henrietta. Chapter 1, The Stranger in the Chapel. The rain fell softly over Redemption Ridge that evening, steady and unhurried, like 1,000 whispered prayers on rooftops. The sound wrapped around the little chapel at the edge of town, a white wooden building with a cross that had seen too many seasons and too many secrets. Inside, candles flickered along the pews, their golden glow reflecting against the stained glass windows. The hum of an old generator filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of wet earth and candle wax. Rachel Moore stood at the back of the church, her fingers tracing the grooves of the wooden pew in front of her. She hadn't planned to stop here. Redemption Ridge was supposed to be a temporary detour, an accidental stop on her journey to nowhere. But when the rain began to fall and her car sputtered to a halt near the sign that read "Welcome to Redemption," she took it as a sign, one she wasn't sure she wanted. She looked around the quiet sanctuary. It was small, humble, and untouched by time. The kind of place where people still bowed their heads before supper and believed that God answered letters written in tears. Her reflection stared back from the window, dark hair pulled into a low bun, eyes alert yet weary, and a faint scar near her temple. She looked like a woman at peace, but inside her chest was a storm she'd been running from for years. "Excuse me?" The voice startled her. Rachel turned to see a woman approaching, gray-haired, kind-eyed, wearing a cardigan 2 sizes too big. Her name tag read Lydia Harper, church coordinator. "Oh, I didn't mean to scare you, dear," Lydia said, smiling. "You must be new in town. I don't recognize your face, and trust me, in Redemption Ridge, I recognize everyone's face." Rachel offered a small, practiced smile. "My car broke down. I was just waiting out the rain." "Well, you came to the right place," Lydia said, glancing at the cross above the pulpit. "That's what this church is for, waiting out storms of every kind." Her words landed heavier than she probably intended. Rachel nodded, murmuring something polite, but her heart raced. She didn't like attention. Not anymore. Lydia continued cheerfully, "We have Bible study on Wednesdays, choir practice on Fridays, and service on Sunday. You're welcome anytime, dear. Pastor Caleb will be thrilled to meet you." Rachel's lips twitched faintly. "Maybe I'll come by Sunday." Lydia's eyes softened. "You look like someone who's been carrying too much for too long. Let God take some of it, Rachel's throat tightened. "I'll try." That night, Rachel found herself in a small guesthouse 2 blocks from the church. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She sat by the window, staring at the flickering streetlight outside. Her duffel bag lay on the floor, zipped and ready, always ready. Inside it were clothes, a Bible with worn pages, and a small metallic object wrapped in cloth. A gun. She unwrapped it slowly, tracing the familiar weight in her hands. She hadn't touched it since that night, the night everything had gone wrong, the night that turned her from Agent Rachel Morgan of the CIA into Rachel Moore, the widow who vanished. Her phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. "They know where you are." Rachel froze. Her pulse thundered. No name, no details. Just the same message she'd received 3 times before. She deleted it instantly, powered off the phone, and whispered a trembling prayer. "Lord, not here. Please, not here." The next morning, the rain had passed, leaving the air crisp and clean. The town of Redemption Ridge awoke slowly, storefronts opening, the smell of freshly baked bread drifting from the bakery, and the sound of children's laughter echoing down the main street. Rachel walked toward the church, her coat wrapped tightly around her. She told herself she just wanted to thank Lydia and be on her way. But something inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, pulled her back toward that little chapel. When she arrived, the doors were open. Inside, a few volunteers were cleaning, dusting, and arranging hymn books. Lydia waved her over. Rachel. You came back. I knew you would. I just wanted to say thank you, Rachel said quietly. For yesterday. Lydia brushed it off. Nonsense. You're staying for the service tonight, aren't you? It's our midweek prayer night. Small crowd, but powerful prayers. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. Maybe I could help. I used to volunteer, back home. Lydia's eyes lit up. Wonderful. We always need more hands. You can help me set up the candles. Rachel smiled, a genuine one this time. As she arranged candles along the altar, she felt an unfamiliar peace settling in her heart. It had been a long time since she'd done something that didn't involve running or hiding. By evening, the chapel filled with gentle murmurs and rustling pages. Pastor Caleb, a man in his early 60s with kind eyes and a voice that carried calm authority, began the service. Sometimes, he said, God brings us to unfamiliar places to remind us that He's still the same, even when everything else changes. Rachel listened, motionless. His words pierced something deep inside her. After the service, she lingered near the back as others filed out. Lydia introduced her to Pastor Caleb. Pastor, this is Rachel Moore. She's new in town and already a blessing. Pastor Caleb smiled warmly. We're glad to have you, Rachel. You've got the look of someone who's fought a few storms, and survived them. Rachel forced a small laugh. Something like that. Well, he said, you're safe here. Redemption Ridge is a quiet place. A healing place. Safe. The word echoed in her mind like a fragile promise she didn't dare believe. That night, Rachel stayed late to help Lydia lock up. The chapel was silent except for the distant chirping of crickets. As she collected him books, Lydia suddenly stopped, clutching her chest. Lydia? Rachel rushed to her side. The older woman's breathing was shallow, her face pale. Rachel guided her to a pew, grabbing her phone to call for help. But before she could, Lydia's trembling hand reached out, holding a small folded note. Someone left this for you, she whispered. Rachel's blood ran cold. For me? Lydia nodded weakly. It was, on the front steps. Rachel unfolded the note with shaking fingers. It was written in neat block letters, "You can't hide forever, Rachel." Her vision blurred. No name. No signature. But she knew that handwriting. She'd seen it before, on classified files, briefing notes, and the dossier of the man who had betrayed her. She shoved the note into her pocket and helped Lydia breathe through the pain until an ambulance arrived. Hours later, Rachel returned to the chapel, now empty. The candles had burned low, their light flickering like tired souls. She stood at the altar, staring up at the wooden cross. Why here? She whispered. Why now? Her voice cracked. You brought me here, didn't you? To start over. But how can I when the past keeps finding me? No answer came, only the creak of the old building and the soft drip of rain returning outside. Rachel took the note from her pocket, struck a match, and watched it burn in the offering plate. The flames devoured the words quickly, leaving behind only ash and smoke that curled toward the cross. She closed her eyes. If they find me again, Lord, let them find you first. Across town, in a small, dimly lit office at the local sheriff's department, Detective Ethan Thompson leaned back in his chair, studying a series of reports scattered before him. A series of break-ins had plagued Redemption Ridge over the past month. Nothing major stolen, just files, ledgers, and donation records from churches and charities. Odd, he thought. Too precise to be random. He rubbed his temples. His head ached, his faith even more so. Since his wife's accident 2 years ago, he'd stopped believing that God cared about the broken pieces of his life. A knock sounded at the door. Detective? There's been another incident, a deputy said. This time at the Redemption Ridge Chapel. A woman collapsed during service. And apparently, he hesitated. There was also a note involved. Ethan looked up. A note? Yes, sir. The new woman in town found it. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What woman? No one knows much about her. Calls herself Rachel Moore. Ethan sighed, grabbing his coat. All right. Let's go. As he drove toward the chapel, he glanced out at the dark horizon, the rain glinting against the windshield. Something about this case felt different, personal, even. He couldn't explain it, but deep down, he sensed it. Redemption Ridge was about to become anything but quiet. Rachel stood outside the chapel, the rain dripping from her hair as the red and blue lights of the sheriff's car illuminated the street. Ethan stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a calm but guarded expression. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, met hers briefly. "You're the one who found the note?" he asked. Rachel nodded, her voice steady but soft. "Yes. It was left for me." "For you?" he repeated, intrigued. "You've only been here a day." "I guess word travels fast," she said, forcing a small smile. Ethan studied her for a long moment. There was something about her posture, disciplined, alert. She didn't flinch easily. Not like an average civilian. "Mind if I ask where you're from, Miss Moore?" She hesitated. "Everywhere. And nowhere." His brow lifted. "That's poetic. It's honest." He gave a faint, knowing smile. "All right, Miss Nowhere. If you remember anything else about that note, let me know." As he turned to leave, Rachel called after him. "Detective, do you believe in second chances?" He paused, looking back at her through the rain. "I used to. Not sure anymore." Rachel's eyes softened. "Maybe you will again." He studied her face for a moment longer before walking away, his boots splashing in puddles. Rachel watched him go, her heart heavy with unspoken truths. She didn't know why, but something in his eyes reminded her of herself, someone running from a pain that had no name. She turned back to the chapel, whispering, "Lord, if you're giving me a second chance, please don't let me waste it." That night, as thunder rolled softly over the ridge, two souls, one haunted by loss, the other by secrets, lay awake in separate corners of the same small town. Both prayed in silence. Both waited for peace. Chapter 2: The Detective's Burden. The alarm on Ethan Thompson's phone buzzed at 5:30 a.m., though he'd been awake long before it sounded. He hadn't slept well in years. Not since that night. The rain had stopped, leaving the town wrapped in a thin mist. He stood by his window, coffee in hand, watching the horizon shift from gray to faint gold. Redemption Ridge always looked peaceful in the mornings, but he'd learned that peace was often just quiet hiding something deeper. He ran a hand over the stubble on his jaw and exhaled slowly. The nightmares had returned, the same ones. His wife, Anna, standing at the edge of that bridge, headlights blinding, her voice echoing over the roar of the river. Then nothing but silence. The silence that had haunted him ever since. He'd come back to Redemption Ridge 2 months ago, his hometown, the place he'd sworn never to return to. The city had burned him out. Too many bodies, too many lies, too many prayers that never seemed to reach heaven. The small-town sheriff's department had offered him a desk job, light work, maybe a chance to breathe again. He thought he'd find peace here. Instead, he'd found a string of strange crimes, each one small, insignificant on its own, but together, they painted a picture that made his instincts itch. And then, last night, the note. He'd seen women hide fear before, witnesses, informants, victims. But Rachel Moore wasn't afraid the way most people were. Hers was a quiet, disciplined fear, the kind that came from experience. She reminded him of a soldier who had seen too much yet refused to surrender. At the sheriff's office, the morning briefing was dull until Deputy Carter burst in holding a manila envelope. "Morning, Detective," Carter said. "Got something you'll want to see. Surveillance footage from the chapel last night." Ethan took the envelope and slid the flash drive into his laptop. The footage played, grainy black and white from an old camera above the church doors. Timestamp, 8:47 p.m. The doors opened. Rachel Moore stepped out, raincoat drawn tight, glancing both ways before crossing the street. Seconds later, a tall figure appeared in the distance, too far to identify, but clearly watching her. The figure turned abruptly when a car passed, disappearing into the shadows. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "So, our mystery woman's got a shadow of her own." Carter frowned. "Think she's mixed up in something?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Either that or she's running from someone who is." He copied the footage onto a separate drive and stood. "I'll talk to her again." "Careful, boss," Carter said, half joking. "She's got that dangerous look." Ethan smirked. "Yeah. The kind that makes good men forget their better judgment." The church was quiet when he arrived. Morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns on the wooden floor. Pastor Caleb was arranging hymnals when Ethan walked in. "Detective Thompson," Caleb said warmly, setting down the books. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Following up on last night," Ethan said. "How's Mrs. Harper?" "She's stable," Caleb said, relief softening his tone. "The doctors said it was just stress." "She's resting." Ethan nodded. "Good to hear. I was hoping to speak with Miss Moore again." Caleb's brow furrowed slightly. "Rachel?" "She's around back. Offered to help clean up after the service. She's quite a blessing already." Ethan smiled faintly. "That seems to be a common opinion." The pastor chuckled. "She's got a quiet spirit, that one. But you can tell she's walked through fire. The kind only grace can heal." Ethan didn't answer. Grace. The word felt foreign on his tongue. He found Rachel behind the chapel, scrubbing old candle holders near the garden fence. She looked up as he approached, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The morning light caught her face just right, strong features, soft eyes, and a quiet sadness that drew him in despite himself. "Detective Thompson," she greeted calmly. "You're up early." "Occupational hazard," he said. "So are you." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Cleaning helps." "Funny. I usually pour coffee and stare at walls." She smiled faintly, then went back to polishing the brass. He leaned against the fence. "I watched the surveillance footage from last night." Rachel froze. "What footage?" "There was a camera above the entrance. It caught someone watching you." Her hand tightened around the cloth. "Did you see who it was?" "Too dark to make out." "You want to tell me why someone would be following you?" Rachel hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe a coincidence." He gave her a look that said he wasn't buying it. "I don't believe in coincidences." "Not anymore." Her eyes met his. "And I don't believe in accidents. Everything happens for a reason." For a moment, they just looked at each other, the weary detective and the woman with secrets, and something silent passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Ethan broke the moment first. "If you remember anything, call me. Please." Rachel nodded. "I will." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Detective, why did you come back here?" "Redemption Ridge, I mean." He paused. "Didn't think anyone noticed." "I notice a lot of things," she said softly. He sighed. "Because I ran out of places to go." She studied him. And did you find what you were looking for? Not yet. He smiled sadly. But maybe I'm getting close. That afternoon, Ethan returned to the station and dug into Rachel Moore's background. Nothing came up. No birth records, no employment history, no driver's license issued in any nearby state. It was as if she'd appeared out of thin air. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk. Who are you really, Rachel Moore? His phone buzzed, a message from Pastor Caleb. Thought you should know. Rachel's car was tampered with last night. Someone cut her brake line. Ethan's stomach dropped. He grabbed his jacket, called Carter to meet him at the church, and drove out with sirens blaring. Rachel stood near her car in the gravel parking lot, arms folded. The hood was up, and the faint smell of leaking fluid hung in the air. Looks like you were right, Ethan said grimly as he crouched beside the vehicle. This wasn't random. Rachel's expression didn't change. I figured as much. You should have called me sooner. I've learned not to make noise when trouble comes. It attracts predators. Ethan glanced up. You talk like someone who's had practice. I have. He studied her face again. Calm, deliberate, unreadable. You're not telling me everything. She looked away. And you wouldn't believe me if I did. He stood, brushing off his hands. Try me. A silence stretched between them, tense but charged. Finally, she said, Detective, have you ever made a choice you thought was right, only to realize it ruined everything? Ethan's breath hitched. Images of the bridge flashed through his mind. Anna's terrified eyes. The sound of metal twisting, glass shattering. Yes, he said quietly. Every day. Rachel nodded slowly. Then maybe you'll understand why I can't tell you everything. Not yet. Before he could reply, a shout came from Carter. Detective! You'll want to see this. They walked to the far side of the church where a small piece of paper fluttered, pinned under a rock. Ethan picked it up. Block letters again. Leave town, Rachel. Or next time, it won't be the brakes. Ethan's jaw clenched. Looks like whoever this is, they're escalating. Rachel's voice was steady. Then I guess I'll stay. He looked at her in disbelief. Stay? After that threat? Her eyes met his, steady, resolute. If I run again, I'll never stop. And I'm tired of running. Ethan wanted to argue, but something in her tone silenced him. She wasn't reckless. She was determined. That evening, Ethan sat on his porch, the sky painted with fading orange. His dog, Max, lay at his feet, tail thumping lazily. He thought about Rachel, the way her eyes hardened when danger was near, the way her hands trembled only when she thought no one was watching. She was hiding something, yes. But whatever it wasn't evil. It was pain. Deep, unspoken pain. He picked up his worn Bible from the table. It had gathered dust for months. He opened it to a random page, Psalm 34. His eyes landed on verse 18, The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. He stared at the words for a long moment, then whispered, If you're still there, Lord. I think you've got another broken one on your hands. 2 nights later, the town gathered for Friday choir practice. Lydia had recovered enough to attend, and the church hummed with warmth again. Rachel volunteered to play the piano while others sang softly. Ethan arrived under the pretense of extra patrol, though he knew better. He leaned against the back wall, watching her fingers glide over the keys. The melody was haunting, slow, tender, and sorrowful. When the song ended, he approached her. Didn't know you played. She smiled faintly. I learned when I was 12. My mother said music was how God translated tears. That sounds like something worth believing, he said. She looked up at him, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them again. But before either could say more, the church lights flickered, and went out. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Then a sound, shattering glass from one of the side windows. "Everybody down!" Ethan shouted, drawing his weapon. Rachel ducked behind the piano, heart pounding. Lydia clutched her Bible, trembling. Pastor Caleb ushered the others to safety as Ethan swept the aisles, flashlight cutting through darkness. A shadow moved near the doorway. He fired once, a warning shot. The shadow vanished into the night. When the lights came back on, chaos gave way to whispers. No one was hurt. But carved into the wooden door was a message sketched on the door: "You can't save her, detective." Ethan stared at it, fury tightening his chest. Rachel stood beside him, her hand brushing his arm. "They're not after you," she said quietly. "They're after me." He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Rachel stayed behind to clean the shattered glass. Ethan lingered, helping in silence. "You didn't have to stay," she said softly. "I know," he replied, sweeping the floor. "But I couldn't just leave you here alone." She smiled faintly. "You don't trust me, but you'll protect me." He met her gaze. "Maybe those two things aren't so different." A beat passed before she whispered, "You'll regret getting close to me, detective." "Everyone does." He set the broom aside. "Maybe I've had enough regrets to last a lifetime." "What's one more?" The tension between them was palpable, an invisible thread pulling, fragile and dangerous. Finally, Rachel turned away, her voice barely audible. "Good night, Ethan." He hesitated before saying, "Good night, Rachel." As he stepped out into the cool night, his chest tightened, not with fear, but with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. That night, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Rachel kneeling beside the shattered window, candlelight flickering against her face. She was both mystery and prayer, danger and grace. He didn't know who she really was. But he knew one thing: God, or fate, or whatever force still cared about lost souls, had brought her into his path for a reason. And whatever burden she carried, he was already shouldering it with her. Chapter 3: Shadows of the Past. The night was still, too still. The forest that wrapped around Rachel's cottage usually hummed with life. Crickets sang in rhythmic patterns, and the wind whispered through pine needles like soft prayer. But tonight, silence ruled, pressing heavy on the air, making even her heartbeat sound too loud. Rachel sat by the small window, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold between her hands. The flickering light of a single candle cast long, trembling shadows across the room. She had tried reading her Bible, Psalm 27, but her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the dark stretch of woods just beyond the fence. And then she heard it. A footstep. Soft. Careful. Deliberate. Her body tensed instantly, years of training snapping back like a whip. She set the cup down quietly, her senses sharpening. The second step came, crunching faintly over fallen leaves. Someone was outside. Rachel moved with quiet precision to the corner of the living room. Beneath the loose floorboard, hidden under a small rug, lay the thing she had sworn she'd never touch again, a sleek black pistol, cold and foreign to the peace she had tried to build. Her hand hesitated above it, trembling. No. Not again. She closed her eyes, whispering through trembling lips, "Lord. I said I was done with this life." Another sound, closer this time. That prayer hung between her and the shadows like smoke. Her fingers curled around the grip, the old weight both familiar and terrifying. She moved silently toward the door, her pulse hammering. The porch light was off. The moon painted the yard in ghostly silver. She slowly turned the handle, then froze. A faint rustle. A low exhale. Someone, or something, was right beyond the door. Rachel steadied her breath, lifted the latch, and flung the door open. Nothing. Just the night. Just the whisper of trees. Just the lingering echo of her own fear. She exhaled shakily, lowering the gun. Her reflection in the window caught her eye, haunted, fierce, and tired. So tired. And in that moment, the memories broke through. Flashback, 4 years ago. Rain hammered against the windows of a hotel in Eastern Europe. The coded messages had come in fragments, encrypted, urgent. Rachel sat across from her partner, Michael Hayes, their faces lit by the pale glow of a laptop screen. "It's a setup," Michael had said. "Rachel, if we move tonight, we walk into a trap. We can't ignore the lead," she'd argued, her voice sharp with conviction. "If we miss this exchange, people die." He'd sighed, his faith in her unwavering even then. "Then I trust you. Always." Those were the last words he ever spoke to her. The explosion tore through the embassy an hour later. Smoke. Screams. Blood. Rachel had survived, but Michael hadn't. And the mission, the one she thought would save lives, had been compromised from the inside. She had been betrayed, by her own agency. That was the night she ran, the night she buried Rachel Coleman, CIA operative. And became Rachel Moore, the woman of faith trying to rebuild from ashes. Rachel's knees buckled under the weight of the memory. She sank to the floor beside the window, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Lord," she whispered, her voice raw, "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding behind names, behind smiles, behind lies. I want peace. I want you." The night pressed close around her, but in that small room, she felt something shift, something tender. As if the heavens had paused to listen. Her tears fell faster. "Forgive me, Father. For what I've done, and for what I can't forget." The dawn broke softly, spilling golden light over the dew-soaked grass. Rachel opened her door to the cool air, her Bible still open on the kitchen table. She breathed in, steadying her heart. Maybe last night had been nothing, just her imagination playing cruel tricks. But then she saw it. Lying on her doorstep. A single white lily. Her breath caught. The world tilted slightly. The flower was pure, delicate, yet it screamed of danger. It wasn't just a flower. It was a message. Michael's favorite flower. And their old code. White lily equals watch your back. She dropped to her knees, the stem trembling in her hand. Someone from her past had found her. Her thoughts spun wildly. Who? How? Why now? Her pulse raced, but her instincts warred with her faith. The old Rachel wanted to run, to fight, to uncover the truth. But the woman she had become, the one who led prayer meetings and taught Sunday school, wanted to trust, to surrender, to believe that God was still sovereign. She stood slowly, the morning breeze lifting her hair as if whispering secrets. "Lord," she said quietly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, "whatever this is, whatever comes next, help me face it with faith, not fear." As she walked into town for groceries, she noticed a figure at the edge of the road, a man leaning against a dark SUV, pretending to check his phone. She couldn't see his face, but when he looked up, her stomach turned cold. The faintest smirk. The glint of recognition. And then he was gone. Rachel gripped the strap of her bag tighter, forcing her legs to keep moving. She didn't know who he was. But she knew the look. That wasn't curiosity. That was surveillance. Her world had shifted again, quietly, completely. And somewhere deep in her spirit, she knew this was only the beginning. That night, Rachel placed the lily inside her Bible, between pages marked with trembling fingers, Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. Even in the shadows, you are still God. And as she closed the book, the sound of an engine echoed faintly in the distance, stopping just beyond her road. Chapter 4: Threads of Suspicion. The morning air hung heavy over Redemption Ridge, thick with the scent of pine and the promise of rain. Detective Ethan Thompson leaned against the hood of his truck, a cup of bitter coffee in one hand and a growing unease in his chest. The world around him looked peaceful, the way small towns always did before secrets began to bleed through the cracks. He glanced at the stack of files on his passenger seat. Vandalism. Missing documents. Anonymous donations. And now, strange land purchases in the name of shell corporations no one could trace. Something wasn't right. He'd seen patterns like this before, in cities where corruption wore Sunday suits and smiled from church pews. The sanctuary smelled faintly of lemon polish and old hymnals when Ethan pushed open the side door of Redemption Community Church. Pastor Caleb was away visiting the hospital, leaving the place quiet, too quiet. Ethan's boots echoed softly across the tiled floor as he entered the small church office. Files lay scattered on the desk, as if someone had been searching for something in a hurry. The ledgers were open, some pages missing entirely. He frowned, flipping through the remaining sheets. Offerings, maintenance, outreach fund, he murmured. But where's the building account? It was gone. The records for the church's new community center, the one Rachel had been helping coordinate, had vanished. He rubbed the back of his neck, the detective in him stirring. Money disappearing from a church account was never a small thing. But what unsettled him more was that Rachel's name appeared several times: approvals, signatures, budget transfers. He didn't want to believe it. He'd seen the kindness in her eyes, the way she cared for people. But the inconsistencies were piling up. Rachel Moore, if that was even her real name, was a mystery wrapped in calm smiles and whispered prayers. And lately, wherever she went, trouble seemed to follow. At the station later that afternoon, Ethan sat in front of the old computer at the sheriff's office. The room buzzed faintly under flickering fluorescent lights. He typed "Rachel Moore background check" into the system, waiting as the screen processed. Nothing. No record before 5 years ago. No family listed. No maiden name. Just nothing. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling through clenched teeth. People didn't just appear out of thin air. Unless they were running from something. His phone buzzed. It was Deputy Carla. "Detective, you might want to hear this. The same group buying property around the ridge? They just bought another plot, right next to the Martins' cottage." Ethan sat upright. "Name of the buyer?" "Front Company," Carla replied. "But the address traces back to an offshore account, registered to an organization called the Orpheus Trust. Ever heard of it?" Ethan's stomach dropped. He had. Years ago, during a federal case that went sideways, the Orpheus Trust had been linked to covert arms deals and intelligence leaks, shadow networks that thrived on fear and silence. If they were here, then Rachel's secrets were bigger than he'd imagined. It was nearing dusk when Ethan drove up the winding dirt road toward Rachel's cottage. The light was fading fast, painting the trees in bruised shades of purple and gold. He spotted her outside, tending to the small garden behind her fence, the hem of her long cardigan brushing against the wildflowers. For a moment, he hesitated. She looked peaceful. Gentle. Like someone who had fought too many storms and was still learning how to breathe again. But his duty outweighed his sympathy. He stepped out of the truck, his voice even. "Rachel." She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "Detective. You're a long way from town." "I could say the same about you," he replied. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" She gestured toward the porch. Of course. They sat opposite each other, the setting sun casting warm light between them. For a while, only the cicadas spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. The church financial records, some are missing. And your name shows up on several of the last transactions. Money was moved to an unlisted account. Rachel's fingers tightened around her teacup. I know how that looks, she said quietly. Then explain it to me, he said, leaning forward. Because right now, it looks like you're hiding something. And I need to know whether you're part of what's happening here, or running from it. Her eyes met his, steady, unreadable. You think I'm dangerous. I think you're not who you say you are. The words hung heavy between them. A soft wind stirred the trees, carrying the scent of rain and something unspoken. Rachel set the cup down carefully. Sometimes, detective, she said finally, the truth can endanger the innocent. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? She stood, wrapping her arms around herself as if warding off a chill. It means that there are things I can't explain without putting others at risk. Things that don't belong in this quiet little town. Her voice cracked, just slightly. And things I've spent years trying to leave behind. Ethan studied her, the part of him that lived by rules and logic at war with the part that believed in grace. Her words didn't sound like lies, but they didn't sound like the full truth either. Before he could press further, thunder rolled across the sky. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly on the porch roof. Rachel turned toward the storm. I should go inside. Please, detective. For both our sakes, let this go. But Ethan didn't move. He watched her retreat into the house, every instinct screaming that whatever she was hiding was tied to the danger creeping closer to Redemption Ridge. That night, rain poured in relentless sheets, drumming against Rachel's windows. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the lonely road outside her cottage. She had just finished praying when she heard it, the faint scrape of metal against wood. The back door. Her heart seized. She reached instinctively for the pistol she had hidden earlier. Footsteps shuffled outside. The handle rattled. Who's there? She called, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. No answer. Then, glass shattered in the kitchen. Rachel ducked, heart pounding, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. A shadow moved near the window. She fired once, warning shot. The intruder fled into the storm, disappearing into the darkness. Silence fell again, broken only by the sound of her ragged breathing and the pounding rain. A minute later, headlights swept across her front yard. Ethan burst through the door, gun drawn. Rachel. You okay? She nodded shakily, lowering her weapon. Someone tried to break in. They knew where to cut the power. He scanned the damage, then turned to her, his eyes burning with new understanding. You weren't the threat, he murmured. You're the target. She gave a small, weary smile. Took you long enough to see that. For a heartbeat, they just stood there, two broken souls framed by stormlight. The air between them crackled with something fragile yet fierce. Ethan holstered his gun slowly. Whoever they are, they're not done. I can protect you, Rachel. But I need the truth. Her gaze softened, torn between fear and trust. Then maybe it's time you knew who I really am. Lightning flashed again, casting her face in pale light. And for the first time, Ethan realized, he wasn't just unraveling a case. He was stepping into a story that would test everything he believed about love, faith, and redemption. Chapter 5, Confession and Coffee. The morning after the break-in dawned gray and heavy, as if the storm had left a residue that even the sunlight couldn't quite wash away. Rachel hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw shadows, flickering, faceless, reaching. She'd made it through the night by whispering scripture under her breath, one verse over and over, "When I am afraid, I will trust in you." Now, sitting in her cottage with her Bible open but unread, she heard a knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Firm, familiar. Ethan. When she opened the door, he stood there in a dark jacket, his eyes softer than they had been the night before. There were circles under them too, evidence that he hadn't slept much either. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I will be," she said. Then, after a pause, "Coffee?" A corner of his mouth lifted. "I was hoping you'd say that." The Morning Glory Diner sat at the edge of town, a small square building with peeling paint and the smell of fresh biscuits wafting through its screen door. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's favorite orders, and when someone new walked in, heads turned. Rachel felt it instantly, the curious glances, the low murmurs. Small towns loved stories, and she had unknowingly become one. They slid into a booth near the window. Ethan ordered black coffee. Rachel asked for hers with cream and cinnamon, out of habit. The waitress, Mary, smiled knowingly before walking away. For a while, neither of them spoke. The clatter of dishes and the hum of the radio filled the silence between them. Finally, Ethan broke it. "You look like you haven't slept." Rachel traced the rim of her cup with her fingertip. "You don't look much better." He gave a low chuckle. "Fair." Then his voice softened. "About last night, whoever came after you wasn't random. They knew what they were doing." "I know," she said quietly. He studied her face, searching for cracks in her calm. "You keep saying that like it's not supposed to scare you." She met his gaze. "I've been scared before, detective. Fear and I, we go way back." The way she said it, steady, distant, made him want to ask more. But something in her eyes told him not to press. Not yet. Their coffees arrived. Steam curled up between them like a fragile veil. Ethan stirred his absent-mindedly, the spoon clinking softly against the cup. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a long silence. "Of course. Do you ever lose faith?" Rachel looked at him, surprised. "Faith?" He nodded. "In God. In prayer. In the idea that things happen for a reason." She hesitated, her heart twisting. "Why do you ask?" He leaned back, exhaling. "Because I did." His voice was low, almost breaking. 3 years ago, my wife, Anna, was in a car accident. I was supposed to pick her up that night. I was running late, because I was at a bar. When I got there, the paramedics were already loading her into the ambulance. Rachel's breath caught. She said nothing, just listened. "They said she died instantly," he continued. "And I told myself I believed that. But the truth is, I still hear her voice in the house sometimes. I still catch myself setting 2 plates at dinner. And for a long time, I stopped believing that prayer could change anything." He stared out the window, his jaw tightening. "I figured, if God could let that happen, maybe he wasn't listening anymore." Rachel's eyes blurred with tears she didn't want him to see. She understood grief, the way it hollowed a person out until they barely recognized themselves. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said softly. He gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You don't have to be. I've made peace with it, I guess. Or maybe I've just learned to carry it quietly." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes, that's all faith is, carrying the weight until it feels lighter." Ethan's words stirred something deep within her, something she had buried beneath years of aliases and regrets. She wanted to tell him everything. About the agency. The missions. The betrayals. About how she'd watched her partner die because she trusted the wrong person. But what would he think if he knew she wasn't just a widow, or the gentle woman who led children's choir, but someone who had once worn a gun and a code name? Would he still see her the same way? She looked at him, the man who had just shared his broken faith over a cup of diner coffee, and her heart ached with the need to be known, truly known. But fear whispered louder. He'll walk away if you tell him. You'll ruin the one safe thing you've found. So she swallowed her truth like bitter medicine, and instead said, Ethan, do you ever think God puts people in our lives at just the right time? He met her eyes. I used to think that was just something people said to make pain sound poetic. And now? He smiled faintly. Now, I'm sitting here having coffee with someone who makes me want to believe again. Her throat tightened. Then maybe that's not an accident. The moment lingered, quiet, sacred, fragile. Outside, the rain had stopped, and light spilled through the window like a benediction. Ethan reached for his cup again, his fingers brushing against hers by accident. She didn't pull away. Something shifted between them, not quite love, not yet, but the faint, trembling beginning of it. For the first time in years, Ethan bowed his head, not publicly, not out of duty, but from a place deep within his soul that still longed for home. His lips moved silently. Lord, if she's the storm, teach me to stand in it. Rachel looked at him then, sensing the prayer without hearing it, and something inside her steadied. The man who had stopped believing was starting to hope again. And maybe, just maybe, so was she. Later that evening as Rachel walked back to her cottage, she thought about the sound of Ethan's voice, the honesty in his confession. The world felt quieter now, though she knew danger still lurked in the unseen corners. But for the first time in a long while, her heart wasn't heavy with fear. It was full, with something gentler. Something like faith. When she reached her porch, she noticed the white lily still lying on her windowsill. It hadn't wilted yet. She touched its petals and whispered, "You can't scare me anymore." Then she went inside, unaware that a black car had been parked down the road, engine idling, watching. Chapter 6, A Whisper from the Past. Sunday mornings in Redemption always carried a certain peace, the kind that settled like dew on the heart. Bells chimed softly from the church tower, and sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the pews in colors of mercy. Rachel should have felt safe here. She should have felt home. But peace, she had learned, was fragile. And this morning, it was about to shatter. It began just after dawn. Rachel's phone buzzed on her nightstand, jolting her from a light sleep. She rubbed her eyes, expecting a message from the women's prayer group. But when she opened her email, her breath caught. No sender. No subject. Just a single line. We know where you are. Finish what you started. She froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. No one should have known that phrase. It was the exact line from her last covert assignment, the mission that went wrong, the one that had left Michael dead and forced her to disappear. Her hands trembled as she reread the message, praying it was a sick coincidence. But her training kicked in. The encryption pattern in the footer wasn't random, it matched a classified CIA signature. Whoever sent this wasn't guessing. They knew her. Rachel's first instinct was to destroy the phone, to burn everything, pack her things, and vanish. But she couldn't, not again. Not after the fragile hope she had begun to build here. Not after Ethan. Instead, she deleted the message, cleared her cache, and whispered a single prayer, "Lord, give me wisdom. I can't run anymore." By the time she reached the church for Sunday service, her heartbeat had slowed, but her hands still shook. She gripped her Bible tightly as she took her seat near the front pew. Pastor Martin's voice filled the sanctuary, calm and measured, speaking from James 1, "The testing of your faith produces perseverance." Rachel tried to focus, but her mind drifted back to the message. Finish what you started. Did they want her to retrieve something? Destroy someone? Or was this a warning that they were already here? From the corner of her eye, she noticed Ethan near the back of the church, standing guard as usual. He caught her gaze, and for a moment, she saw concern flicker there. She quickly looked away, hoping he hadn't seen the tremor in her hands. But he had. After service, as the congregation lingered over small talk and coffee, Ethan approached her quietly. "Hey," he said. "You look pale. Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Just didn't sleep much." He tilted his head slightly. "You sure that's all?" Rachel hesitated, the truth hovering on her lips, begging to be told. But fear wrapped around her throat like wire. If she told him, he'd start digging. And if he started digging, people could die. "I'm fine," she lied softly. "Really?" He studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right. But if something's wrong, Rachel, don't face it alone." His voice lingered in her mind long after he walked away. That afternoon, as the church members gathered at the site of the orphanage they were rebuilding after last year's fire, the air buzzed with the sounds of hammers, saws, and laughter. Rachel wore a faded blue shirt and work gloves, her hair tied back. For a moment, she almost felt normal again. She was helping place new tiles along the altar floor when her hand brushed something strange beneath the wooden base. Metal. She frowned, pried gently with a small screwdriver, and froze. A black device, no larger than her thumb, was embedded beneath the platform. A recording device. Her throat went dry. She turned it over, examining it. It wasn't standard surveillance tech, it was military grade. High-end. The kind she'd used in her old life. Someone was spying on the church. Her first thought was Ethan, he needed to know. But before she could call him, a voice echoed from the doorway. "You okay down there?" Rachel jumped, tucking the device quickly into her pocket. It was Mrs. Henley, one of the volunteers, balancing a tray of lemonade. Rachel smiled quickly. "Fine, just fixing a loose tile." Mrs. Henley nodded and moved on, humming a hymn under her breath. Rachel exhaled slowly. She turned the recorder over in her hand once more, her stomach knotting. Whoever had planted it wasn't after church gossip. They were listening for something else. And deep down, Rachel feared she already knew what. That evening, Ethan sat in his office, reviewing new reports on the Orpheus Trust. He'd traced several suspicious donations funneled through charity organizations, including the very same orphanage fund the church had been rebuilding. On the surface, it looked clean. But the money trail told a darker story, donations leading to offshore accounts, routed through fake humanitarian groups. Someone was using the church as cover. He rubbed his temples, the pieces swirling in his mind like fragments of a shattered puzzle. Missing church funds. Land purchases. Anonymous threats. And Rachel, somehow caught in the middle of it all. Then it hit him. The Orpheus Trust, he'd seen it before. Years ago, in a federal case involving espionage and smuggling. The same case that had ended abruptly after an informant's death. Could Rachel have been part of that? He didn't want to believe it, but the coincidences were stacking too neatly. The next morning, Rachel sat on the church steps, watching children play in the yard, their laughter carrying through the crisp air. Ethan approached, holding a file under his arm. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Please." For a while, they just watched the children run and chase each other through the grass. Then he spoke quietly. "I've been digging into the land deals. And I think I found something. Whoever's been buying property around Redemption isn't just after real estate, they're laundering money. Using charity projects as fronts." Rachel's chest tightened. So he knew. Ethan turned toward her. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" She looked down at her hands, clasped in her lap. The weight of the secret pressed heavy on her shoulders. Every instinct screamed to tell him. To trust him. But then she remembered the email. The warning. "Finish what you started." Her voice came out small, almost breaking. "Ethan, if I told you the truth, you might never look at me the same way again. He leaned forward. Try me. Tears burned her eyes, but she forced them back. Years ago, I worked for someone. I thought it was for good. But it cost people their lives. And now, that past, whatever it was, it's found me again. He frowned. Who sent the threat? She blinked. What? You're trembling, Rachel. You've been trembling all morning. Something happened. Her silence told him everything. Ethan exhaled slowly. Okay. Whoever is behind this, they're connected to Orpheus. And that means they're dangerous. But we'll figure it out together. Rachel looked at him then, really looked. His steady eyes, the quiet conviction in his voice. For the first time, she believed him. Still, fear lingered. She reached into her pocket and handed him the small recording device. Then start here. He turned it over, his brow furrowing. Where did you find this? Under the church altar. Ethan's jaw tightened. They're watching us. Rachel nodded, her voice barely a whisper. They're not just watching, Ethan. They're waiting. That night, alone in her cottage, Rachel sat by the window, watching the fog roll in over the ridge. She opened her Bible, her trembling fingers stopping at Isaiah 41 verse 10. Fear not, for I am with you, be not dismayed, for I am your God. A faint sound pinged from her laptop. Another email. This time, only one line, you shouldn't have told him. Her heart stopped. Outside, across the dark field, a faint red light blinked from the trees. A camera lens. She whispered shakily, Lord, they've already found me. Chapter 7, The Storm Within. The rain began before midnight, soft at first, whispering against rooftops, then harder, thrashing against the windows of Redemption Ridge. The wind moaned through the pines, carrying with it the scent of earth and thunder. Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his truck outside Rachel's cottage, windshield wipers cutting rhythmic arcs through the storm. He told himself he wasn't following her, just watching over her. After the last email, the hidden recorder, and her trembling confession, he knew she was in danger. But he also knew she was hiding more. And tonight, something told him the truth was about to come out. At 11:47 p.m., Rachel stepped out of her cottage, wrapped in a gray coat and scarf. She looked over her shoulder once before heading down the dirt road that led out of town. No umbrella. No hesitation. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Where are you going at this hour? He waited until she disappeared around the bend, then turned on his headlights just enough to follow at a distance. The road wound past the old mill, now abandoned, and down toward the railroad tracks, a forgotten stretch of town where few dared to walk after dark. Rachel's pace quickened as she approached a lone figure standing under a broken street lamp. A man. Ethan parked the truck and stepped into the rain, the cold slicing through his jacket. He moved closer, careful to stay in the shadows. Rachel's voice carried faintly over the storm. You shouldn't have contacted me. The man's reply was low, sharp. You should have finished the job, Rachel. Ethan frowned. His instincts flared. Who is this guy? Rachel's tone hardened. People died. You knew what Project Exodus really was. It wasn't charity, it was blood money. At the mention of that name, Project Exodus, Ethan's heart lurched. He'd heard it once before, buried deep in a classified file he'd stumbled upon years ago. A secret network that used faith-based organizations as cover for global arms trafficking. He'd thought it was just a conspiracy. But Rachel's voice said otherwise. The man took a step closer, his silhouette trembling with anger. You think walking away absolves you? You were part of it too. Rachel's voice broke. I was trying to stop it. That's why I exposed the network in Prague. That's why Michael died. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, pale, drenched, trembling. For a moment, Ethan saw the woman behind the secrets, haunted, desperate, but brave. Then, thunder cracked, and with it, a gunshot. Rachel screamed as the man fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Ethan ran forward instinctively. Rachel! She spun around, her hands covered in blood, a gun lying near her feet. Her eyes were wide with terror. I didn't, he pulled it first. Ethan, you have to believe me. Ethan crouched beside the fallen man, one look told him there was no saving him. The bullet had gone clean through his chest. The gun in Rachel's hand was standard issue, not hers, he realized, but her fingerprints were all over it now. He radioed for backup, but the storm cut the signal. The thunder drowned out every sound except Rachel's sobs. Ethan, she whispered, her voice breaking, you have to listen to me. He was part of it, the network. They called it Project Exodus. It's still active. They're using churches and charities, places like Redemption, to move weapons. And someone here is helping them. Ethan stared at her, heart pounding. Rachel, you told me you were done with that life. I was, she said, shaking her head. But they won't let me go. I thought I could build something new, something good, but the past keeps clawing its way back. Lightning flashed again, and Ethan saw movement in the trees, shadows slipping away into the darkness. Someone else was here, he muttered, scanning the tree line. This was a setup. They hid the body behind the old freight shed to buy time. Rachel was trembling so badly that Ethan draped his jacket over her shoulders. Rain streamed down her hair, plastering it to her face. You shouldn't have followed me, she whispered. Yeah, well, he said quietly, you shouldn't meet armed men in the middle of the night. Despite everything, her lips curved into a weak, sad smile. Fair point. Ethan's eyes softened. Tell me the truth, Rachel. All of it. She looked down at the ground. I worked for the CIA's shadow unit, Project Exodus. We were meant to dismantle corruption inside faith-based organizations. But it got twisted. The ones funding the mission were the same ones profiting from the chaos. When I found out, I exposed them. People died. My cover was blown. I vanished. And now they've found you again. Yes. And if they've come this far, they're not stopping until I'm silenced. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, his thoughts racing. He wanted to comfort her, to promise safety, but the truth was, she was now tied to a murder. And the system he served wouldn't care about the details. His badge felt heavier than ever. Rachel, he said quietly, the man's dead. When this gets out, they'll come for you. I have to report it. Her eyes filled with tears. If you do, they'll bury me before I get a chance to prove anything. He looked away, torn in two. His duty said turn her in. His heart whispered protect her. He took a deep breath. Tell me one thing, why me? Why trust me with this? Rachel's voice trembled, but her eyes held his steadily. Because you still believe in good, even when the world tries to convince you it doesn't exist. You see people for who they can be, not what they've done. I lost that a long time ago. Ethan swallowed hard, rain streaking down his face. Rachel, if I help you, I'll be risking everything. She took his hand, her fingers cold and shaking. Then maybe faith isn't about being safe. Maybe it's about being obedient, even when it hurts. Those words hit something deep in him. The same faith he'd buried after his wife's death stirred faintly in his chest, like a flicker of light in the dark. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. Ethan stepped back, his jaw tightening. We need to move. They'll send someone to clean this up. Rachel nodded, still trembling. Where do we go? My cabin in the hills, he said. No one knows about it. You'll be safe there. For now. She hesitated, glancing once more at the lifeless body. What about him? Ethan looked down, guilt tightening in his chest. We'll come back when it's safe. Right now, they're setting the stage, and you're the lead suspect. They drove through the storm in silence, the rain drumming on the roof like war drums. Every mile took them further from redemption, but closer to the truth neither was ready to face. Rachel stared out the window, her mind replaying the gunshot over and over. Ethan kept glancing at her, at the woman who had become both his mystery and his awakening. At last, he whispered, "Rachel, did you ever kill anyone? Back then?" She turned to him, eyes glistening in the dim light. "Yes. But never the innocent." He nodded slowly, the truth sitting between them like a wound. "Then we'll find whoever's doing this, together." Outside, the storm raged on, a reflection of the chaos within them both, two souls scarred by loss, drawn together by faith, love, and a danger neither could escape. And far behind them, in the darkness of the old rail yard, a figure in a raincoat crouched beside the fallen man, retrieving the shell casing with gloved hands. He spoke softly into a calm device. The detective took the bait. Phase 2 begins. Chapter 8, Faith on Trial. The morning after the storm, Redemption woke to the sound of sirens. Police cruisers roared through the rain-soaked streets, scattering puddles and curious onlookers. Word spread like wildfire, a body had been found near the old rail yard. And by sunrise, so had the suspect. Rachel. She didn't resist when they came for her. Ethan had begged her to stay hidden, but she'd walked back into town at dawn, soaked and weary, ready to face whatever came. Maybe she was tired of running. Maybe she believed that somehow, the truth would set her free. As they handcuffed her outside her cottage, she looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "If this is my cross, Lord, give me strength to bear it." The neighbors gathered in stunned silence. Whispers cut through the drizzle. "She killed a man?" "No." "Rachel? The one who teaches Bible study?" "I knew something was off about her. Always so secretive." Ethan arrived just as they were placing her in the back of the patrol car. His face was pale, jaw tight. "Rachel," he called, stepping forward. "Don't say anything until but she shook her head, her eyes calm, almost peaceful. "Do what you have to do, detective." He met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw not the broken woman haunted by her past, but someone surrendering fully to grace, even in chains. By midday, the news had spread beyond Redemption Ridge. The local paper headline read, "Church volunteer arrested in midnight murder." Inside the station, Rachel sat in the small holding cell, her damp clothes replaced with a gray jumpsuit. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. She could hear the murmurs of officers beyond the bars, men and women she'd once prayed with on Sunday mornings, now whispering about her as if she were a stranger. "She's dangerous, that one. Doesn't look like a killer, but you never know. She had a past, they say. Secret stuff." Rachel bowed her head. Shame burned through her like fire. Not because they doubted her, but because they had every reason to. Her past was a tangle of lies and missions, of things she could never confess. "Lord," she whispered, clutching the small cross pendant around her neck, "I don't understand this. But if you're still writing this story, please, let there be redemption at the end of it." The heavy door creaked open. A voice, gentle but firm, broke through her prayers. "May I have a moment with her?" It was Pastor Caleb. Rachel looked up in surprise. His coat was still damp from the rain, his Bible clutched under one arm. The officer hesitated, then nodded and left them alone. Pastor Caleb stepped closer to the bars. His eyes held no accusation, only compassion. "Rachel," he said softly, "you don't owe me an explanation. I came because I believe you." Tears filled her eyes. "Why?" Everyone else sees me as a criminal. Maybe they're right. He smiled faintly. Grace doesn't erase your past, Rachel, it redeems it. The same cross that covered my sins covers yours too. She gripped the bars. You don't know what I've done. I don't need to, he replied. I know the one who forgives all of it. And I know you were brought here for a reason, not to be destroyed, but to be restored. Rachel's tears fell freely now. For the first time since her arrest, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever, hope. Caleb placed his hand on the bars, bowing his head in prayer. Father, stand with your daughter in this trial. Let truth speak louder than accusation, and let light expose what's hidden in the dark. Amen. Rachel whispered through her tears, Amen. While the world turned against her, Ethan was fighting in silence. He'd been suspended for conflict of interest, but that didn't stop him. In the dim light of his office, he replayed footage from security cameras near the old rail yard. Most feeds were corrupted, cut just minutes before the shooting. But Ethan knew how to recover data others missed. Hours passed. His eyes burned from staring at the screen, but then, there it was. A faint silhouette. 2 men, not one, near the scene. A second shooter, hidden behind a stack of freight crates. He enhanced the footage frame by frame, heart pounding. The muzzle flash came from the shadows, not from Rachel's position. The bullet trajectory didn't match her gun. She was innocent. But as he processed the file, a warning flashed across his monitor, access restricted, classified channel detected. Then his phone buzzed with a blocked call. Detective Thompson, a cold voice said, "Stop digging. She's guilty. Let it go." Ethan's jaw clenched. Who is this? Someone who can end your career, and your life. The call cut off. Ethan sat back, the room spinning around him. He knew now, someone powerful was pulling strings, and Rachel's arrest was only the beginning. That night, he drove to the station under cover of darkness. The rain had returned, steady and cold. He parked a few blocks away, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed that this was the line, the point of no return. Inside, the night shift was thin. 2 officers at the front desk, 1 patrolling the hallway. Ethan knew the layout. He'd walked these corridors for years. He slipped in through the side entrance, using his old badge. The security light blinked green. He exhaled in relief. Rachel was in the holding cell, head bowed, lips moving in silent prayer. "Rachel," he whispered. Her eyes lifted, disbelief, then relief washing over her face. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" He held up a small USB drive. "Proof. I found the footage. You didn't shoot him. There was someone else." Her breath caught. "Then, why are you here?" He glanced down the hall, then back at her. "Because the people who did this won't let that proof see daylight. They'll bury it. They'll bury you." She stood, gripping the bars. "Ethan, you can't, I have to." His voice was firm, steady, resolute. "You once told me faith isn't about being safe. Maybe this is what mine looks like." Tears welled in her eyes. "They'll take your badge." "Let them," he said softly. "I'd rather lose a badge than lose my soul." He unlocked the cell. The door creaked open. Rachel hesitated only a moment before stepping out, her eyes full of gratitude and fear. "Where will we go?" she whispered. "Somewhere no one will find us," he said. "And then we'll bring the truth to light." As they slipped out through the rain-soaked alley, the town clock struck midnight, a haunting echo across the hills. Inside the station, a red light blinked on one of the monitors. Someone was watching. A voice on a radio whispered, "They're gone. Activate Phase 3." Chapter 9, The Chase. The night had swallowed Redemption Ridge in a thick, mournful silence. The rain came steady, a curtain of water veiling the forest road as Ethan's truck wound through the crooked mountain pass. Headlights sliced through the fog, and beside him, Rachel sat rigid, her fingers trembling against her lap. The rhythmic swish of the wipers was the only sound between them for miles. Neither spoke. Words had lost their meaning after the past 48 hours, after the betrayal, the manhunt, the cell, and the truth that had shattered everything. Ethan's jaw clenched as he gripped the steering wheel. "They'll be looking for us by now," he muttered. "Highway Patrol, FBI, maybe even the ones who set you up." Rachel turned to the window, watching the rain streak like tears. "They already found us once," she whispered. "They won't stop until I'm gone, or silenced." "Not if I can help it," Ethan said firmly, his voice low but fierce. He glanced at her, and for a fleeting moment, she saw not the detective, but the man who had chosen to risk everything, his career, his reputation, his freedom, for her. They drove for another hour before the lights of civilization faded behind them. Deep in the Appalachian wilderness, the road narrowed to a single, muddy path leading to an abandoned cabin Ethan had once used for stakeouts years ago. He parked under the shadow of pines and killed the engine. "Come on," he said. "We'll be safe here, for now." The cabin smelled of dust and damp wood, its windows clouded and walls lined with cobwebs. A lantern cast a soft, golden glow as Ethan built a fire. The warmth spread slowly, flickering across Rachel's pale face. She sat near the hearth, clutching a blanket around her shoulders, her eyes distant, haunted. Ethan watched her quietly. "You haven't said a word since we left town." "What is there to say?" she asked softly. "You've seen the worst of me, Ethan. The lies, the blood, the chaos I tried to leave behind." Her eyes shimmered with pain. "Everywhere I go, someone gets hurt." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You didn't kill that man, Rachel. I saw enough to know that much." She met his gaze, tears glistening. "But I was there, wasn't I? If I hadn't agreed to meet him, he'd still be alive. Maybe all this wouldn't have happened." Ethan shook his head. "You can't carry the weight of everyone's sin. You've done that long enough." The fire crackled, filling the silence. Outside, thunder rumbled low across the hills, like the earth itself was groaning. Ethan handed her a steaming mug of instant coffee. "Drink. You'll need it." Rachel took a sip, her hands still trembling. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded. "You're welcome." Then, after a long pause, he added, "You know, I used to believe people couldn't change. That once you broke faith, there was no coming back." Rachel looked up, curiosity flickering through her sadness. "What changed?" He smiled faintly. "You did. Somewhere between chasing you and protecting you, I realized I wasn't angry at you, I was angry at God. For taking my wife. For not answering when I prayed." He drew in a shaky breath. "But tonight, hiding here in the middle of nowhere, I can't help but feel, maybe he never stopped listening. Maybe I just stopped believing." Rachel's heart ached at his words. She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Ethan, you don't know how much that means to me." "Then tell me," he said softly. "Tell me everything. No more secrets." She hesitated, eyes glistening in the lantern light. Then, like a dam breaking, the words poured out. "I was part of a covert operation called Project Exodus. We were supposed to infiltrate a humanitarian network suspected of funding weapons trafficking through religious charities. I got too close, too deep. My cover was blown, and my partner, he died because I hesitated. I couldn't pull the trigger." Her voice broke. "After that, I quit. I ran. Changed my name. And tried to start over. But the past, it doesn't stay buried." Ethan's gaze softened. You were trying to make things right. I was trying to survive, she whispered. But I think God was still chasing me, even through the shadows. He reached across the table, taking her hand firmly in his. Then let's stop running. Together. Her breath caught. There, in the flickering glow, something holy stirred, something fragile but fierce. A quiet kind of faith. A spark of love. Morning came shrouded in mist. The rain had eased, but the forest seemed to hold its breath. Ethan stepped outside to check the perimeter when he spotted tire tracks, fresh ones, cut deep into the mud. Rachel, he called sharply. We've been found. She rushed to the doorway, eyes wide. How? Before he could answer, the distant roar of engines shattered the stillness. Black SUVs snaked up the narrow trail, headlights piercing the morning fog. A bullet whizzed past, splintering the cabin door. Down! Ethan shouted, pulling her to the floor as glass exploded around them. Adrenaline surged through his veins. He grabbed his gun from the duffel bag, firing a warning shot toward the treeline. Rachel crawled to the back window, scanning for an escape. There's an old logging path behind the cabin, it leads down to the river. Go, he ordered, covering her as they sprinted into the forest. Bullets tore through the air, branches snapping around them. Ethan's lungs burned, but he kept moving, because she was ahead, and he wouldn't lose her too. They reached the riverbank, the current raging from the night's storm. Rachel turned to him, panic in her eyes. We'll never make it. Yes, we will, he said, gripping her hand. Trust me. They plunged into the icy water just as headlights broke through the trees behind them. The current swept them downstream, cold, violent, relentless. Rachel gasped as they surfaced near a fallen log, clinging for breath. Keep your head up. Ethan shouted, voice hoarse over the roar. We're almost there. The current slammed them against the rocks, but somehow, by sheer will or divine mercy, they made it to the far bank, collapsing onto the mud, soaked and shaking. Rachel coughed, laughter bubbling through her tears. We're alive, somehow. Ethan lay beside her, breathless, eyes fixed on the sky that had begun to lighten with dawn. Not somehow, he said softly. A miracle wrapped in mercy. Rachel turned her head toward him, eyes filled with quiet awe. Maybe, she whispered, that's what faith really is, trusting the miracle you can't yet see. And for the first time Ethan believed her. Chapter 10, The Revelation. The storm had passed, leaving Redemption Ridge blanketed in a washed-out silence. The dawn was a pale gray, the kind of morning that felt like the world had held its breath all night and didn't yet know if it should exhale. Ethan's truck, dented and streaked with mud, crawled along the back road toward town. Rachel sat beside him, still damp, wrapped in his jacket. Her face was drawn, tired, yet steady. Neither spoke for a long while. The forest seemed to listen. Are you sure about this? Ethan finally asked, his eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. He knew what her answer would be before she gave it. Rachel turned her head slightly, gazing at the mist curling through the trees. We've been running from shadows, Ethan. It's time we faced the light, whatever it shows us. He nodded. Then we do it together. They reached the outskirts of Redemption Ridge just as the sun broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the steeple of the small white church. It looked almost holy again, fragile but standing, much like the two souls returning to it. Inside, the sanctuary was quiet. A few wooden pews still bore the dust of construction, the scent of old hymnals and candle wax heavy in the air. Rachel's heart clenched as memories flooded her, the laughter of the children from the orphanage, the hymns she used to sing with trembling faith, the sermons about grace that she once doubted could apply to her. And there, kneeling by the altar, was Pastor Caleb. He turned at the sound of the door creaking open. Relief swept across his face when he saw them. Rachel, he breathed. Thank God. We thought, his voice faltered. We thought you might not make it back. Rachel smiled faintly, her voice soft. By all accounts, we shouldn't have. Ethan moved closer, scanning the church with the instinct of a detective still on alert. Pastor, there's something we need to tell you. It's about the organization, the people behind all this. Caleb nodded, gesturing toward his office. Let's talk inside. The office was small, lined with Bibles, dusty books, and old mission reports. A half-empty coffee cup sat beside a stack of donation files. Rachel sat at the edge of the desk, scrolling through a laptop Ethan had pulled from his bag. These are the encrypted files I found on the flash drive, Ethan explained. The same ones we retrieved from the cabin before we ran. He plugged it into Caleb's computer. The screen flickered, then rows of names and accounts appeared, charity donations, mission funds, and a long trail of offshore transactions. Rachel leaned in, her brow furrowed. Look here, transfers routed through the orphanage's rebuilding project. That's how they moved the money. Ethan followed the pattern with his finger. And whoever had access to these accounts wasn't just stealing, they were laundering funds for the same network from Project Exodus. Caleb's face went pale. But that would mean someone here, someone inside the church. His voice broke off as the office door creaked open. Miriam stood there, a trembling figure framed in the doorway. Her hands clutched a small leather-bound notebook to her chest. Her eyes, usually bright with kindness, were red from crying. Pastor, she whispered. You don't have to say it. I already know. Rachel's stomach dropped. Ethan rose slowly from his chair, tension rippling through his shoulders. Miriam, he said carefully, why don't you close the door and tell us what's going on? She nodded, tears spilling freely as she stepped inside and turned the lock. I never meant for it to go this far, she began, her voice shaking. I thought I could fix it before anyone got hurt. Caleb stood, his expression filled with grief. Fix what, child? Miriam's gaze darted to Rachel, full of shame and sorrow. They found me, Rachel. The same people you were trying to expose. Years ago, after your cover was blown, they came to me. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd destroy my family. My brother was overseas, they threatened his life. Rachel's pulse quickened. So you became their mole, she whispered, the pieces falling together. You gave them access to the church's accounts. Miriam nodded miserably. I did. I sent reports, moved funds, even planted the recording device under the altar when they told me to. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to, but I was trapped. Every time I tried to stop, they reminded me of what they could do. Ethan's jaw tightened. And when the operation went south, when the murder happened, they wanted to clean up the mess. I didn't know they'd go that far, she said, sobbing now. I swear, I didn't. Caleb reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Miriam, grace is still for you. Whatever you've done, it's not beyond God's mercy. But Miriam shook her head violently. No, Pastor. Not after this. She opened the small notebook in her hands, pages filled with coded entries, names, and dates. This is everything. Every message, every transaction. It's enough to expose them. But they'll come for me once they know. Rachel stepped closer, her voice trembling with compassion. Then we'll protect you, Miriam. You're not alone anymore. For a moment, hope flickered in Miriam's eyes. But then it dimmed, fading like a candle in the wind. You don't understand, she said quietly. They're already here. A sound echoed from outside, the faint rumble of an approaching vehicle. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He moved to the window, parting the blinds just enough to see a black SUV pulling into the church lot. Rachel, he hissed. We've got company. Miriam's breathing quickened. Panic filled her eyes as she clutched the notebook tighter. They'll kill anyone who tries to stop them. I can't let more blood be spilled. Before Ethan or Rachel could react, Miriam took a single step back toward the altar. Her tears fell freely, her voice a broken whisper, "Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I tried." Then she turned, and the sound that followed split the silence like thunder. A gunshot. Rachel screamed. Caleb fell to his knees. Ethan rushed forward, but it was too late. Miriam collapsed beside the altar, the notebook slipping from her grasp, her blood mingling with the dust of the floor she had once cleaned with joy. Rachel fell beside her, sobbing. "No, no, no," her hands trembled as she cradled the woman's lifeless shoulders. She was trying to make it right. Ethan picked up the notebook, his face pale, his voice low. "She just did." He met Rachel's gaze, eyes wet, heart heavy. "This is the proof we need. But at what cost?" Rachel wiped at her tears, her voice breaking. "She carried our burden, Ethan. The guilt, the secrets, the lies. But maybe, even in her last breath, she found grace." Caleb closed his eyes, whispering a prayer through his grief. "Lord, receive her soul. And teach us to walk in your light, even when the shadows follow." That evening, the church bell tolled softly across Redemption Ridge. The sound carried over the valley, mingling with the wind and the whisper of leaves. Rachel and Ethan stood outside the chapel steps, the fading sun painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. "She didn't deserve that," Rachel said quietly. "None of us do," Ethan replied. "That's the point of grace." Rachel turned toward him, her eyes glistening, not just with sorrow, but with something sacred. "All this time, I thought I was chasing justice," she whispered. "But what I really needed was redemption." Ethan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining gently. "We both did." They looked back at the small church, the place where lies had festered, where faith had faltered, and where grace had finally broken through. Ethan's voice was steady as he spoke. "Let's rebuild it, Rachel. Not just the walls. The trust. The faith. The light." Rachel smiled faintly through her tears. "Together? Always." And as the last rays of sunlight bathed them in warmth, the shadows that had once haunted their steps began, at long last, to fade. Chapter 11, The Light Beyond Shadows. Spring had come to Redemption Ridge. The once silent church bells rang again, not in mourning but in victory. The scent of rain and wildflowers filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter from children playing near the rebuilt orphanage. But beneath the calm, Rachel and Ethan knew one thing remained unfinished. Though Miriam's confession had exposed part of the network, the true masterminds, the faceless men who had ordered the killings and framed Rachel, were still out there. The organization she once infiltrated had gone underground, their files erased, their influence hidden. Until now. One morning, Ethan found a letter slid under the church door. It bore no name, only a seal, an eagle clutching a cross, the emblem of the faith-based organization Rachel once investigated under Project Exodus. Inside was a single line of text: "You were never meant to find the light." Rachel's heart sank. "They're still watching." But Ethan's eyes sharpened. "Then they just made a mistake, they told us they're still here." He took the letter straight to a trusted contact in the city's Bureau of Internal Affairs, a friend who had once served with him before he left the force. Together, they traced the paper's watermark and found it linked to Lumen Aid International, a charity operating out of a nearby region, one of the same shell companies Rachel had once exposed years ago. Through weeks of investigation, Rachel and Ethan gathered every record, photograph, and coded message Miriam had left behind before her tragic end. Hidden among her things, Rachel found an encrypted flash drive. When decrypted, it revealed financial transfers, millions funneled through fake church charities and humanitarian fronts. At the top of the list of recipients was a familiar name, Reverend Samuel Trent, a prominent evangelist who had recently moved to the neighboring valley. He was always visiting Redemption before all this started, Ethan murmured. Always asking questions about the church finances. Rachel's eyes widened. He was one of the handlers. He used faith as a cover to move weapons and funds. They couldn't confront him directly. Samuel Trent was powerful, guarded, and politically connected. So they did what Rachel did best, they set a trap. Using a charity outreach event as cover, Rachel invited Reverend Trent to speak at Redemption Church. Ethan and a small team from internal affairs set up discreet surveillance in the building, hidden cameras, microphones, and security teams positioned quietly around the grounds. That evening, the church was full. Rachel stood at the front, speaking to the crowd about redemption and truth. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of conviction. When darkness hides in holy places, she said, it is the truth that sets the captives free. Trent shifted in his seat, clearly uneasy. When the sermon ended, Ethan approached him. Reverend Trent, he said, offering a cordial nod. Mind stepping into the office for a moment? Just some questions about the donation records. Trent smiled politely, but his eyes flickered with calculation. Of course, detective. Inside the office, Rachel joined them. On the table lay the flash drive and several documents, proof of his involvement. You've done a lot of good work in the Lord's name, Rachel said evenly. But the Lord sees everything, even what we do in the dark. Trent's composure cracked. You don't know what you're talking about. Ethan slid a folder across the desk. Actually, we do. These are the accounts you used to fund illegal arms shipments under your charity's name. And here, he tapped the file, are records tying you to the death of Rachel's former partner Michael. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Trent stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You can't prove any of it. From the doorway, Ethan's old partner stepped in, badge in hand. We already did. Within minutes, the church office was surrounded by law enforcement. Trent's attempt to flee was cut short by flashing lights and the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. As he was led away, his eyes met Rachel's, defiant at first, then hollow. You think you've won? He spat. Rachel's gaze was calm. No, she said softly. Grace did. The arrest of Reverend Trent made national headlines. The entire organization crumbled within weeks, dozens of hidden accounts exposed, properties seized, and key figures brought to justice. For the first time in years, Rachel felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The shadows that once followed her were gone. Ethan resigned from his detective position officially but was honored for his bravery and integrity. Together, he and Rachel rebuilt Redemption Ridge, not as fugitives or survivors, but as servants of grace. The church became a sanctuary of healing. The orphanage thrived under Rachel's care, and the youth ministry under Ethan's guidance grew larger every month. Months later, one quiet evening, Rachel sat at her desk, the warm light of a lamp spilling across her journal. Outside, the laughter of children mingled with the rustle of the wind through the trees. She wrote, the truth finally came to light. Justice was served, not through vengeance, but through courage and faith. Redemption Ridge has become a place of healing again. Ethan and I no longer run from our pasts, we walk with them, redeemed. The shadows taught me to see the light, and love taught me to trust the one who never stopped chasing me. She closed the journal, her heart at peace. Ethan entered the room, holding 2 cups of coffee and smiling. Still writing? He teased gently. Still remembering, she replied. He sat beside her, looking out the window at the glowing steeple. You know, he said, I think we finally found it. Found what? He smiled. Redemption. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the last light of day poured through the window, touching the cross at the top of the church steeple. The story that began in shadows ended in light, complete, redeemed, and at peace. Chapter 12, Love Beneath the Cross. The sun rose slow and golden over Redemption Ridge, brushing the church steeple in warm light. The bell, silent for weeks, tolled once again, its sound rolling across the sleepy town like a call to hope. People came in quiet groups, hearts heavy with memory yet curious with expectation. Something sacred was about to happen. Rachel stood at the edge of the sanctuary, staring up at the wooden cross that hung above the altar. It was the same cross she had knelt beneath when she first arrived, when guilt still bound her like chains, when she thought grace was for everyone except her. Now, the morning light poured through the stained glass windows, painting her face in hues of rose and gold. It felt like forgiveness itself had found her. Ethan approached quietly, his freshly pressed shirt tucked into his jeans, the badge that once defined him now resting inside his coat pocket rather than pinned to his chest. He wasn't here as a detective anymore. He was here as a man, healed, changed, and made new. "You ready?" he asked softly. Rachel took a long breath. "No," she admitted, then smiled faintly. "But I think that's what faith really means, standing up even when you're still afraid." He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You'll do fine. They need to hear your truth, Rachel. We all do." The pews filled quickly. Pastor Caleb stood near the pulpit, his eyes glistening as he looked over his flock. Beside him, the choir waited in quiet reverence, hymn books open to the song that had become the town's prayer, "Amazing Grace." Rachel stepped up to the front, her steps slow but steady. Every gaze turned toward her. Some faces showed curiosity, others quiet hurt, but most reflected something deeper. Compassion. She reached the podium and set down a folded piece of paper, though her hands trembled too much to unfold it. "I was going to read a speech," she began, her voice thin but clear, "but I think it's time I just speak." A hush fell. Even the air seemed to still. "I came to Redemption Ridge to escape," she said. "I thought if I buried my past deep enough, maybe I could start over. But the truth," she paused, her eyes misting. "The truth always finds you. And sometimes, it doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to set you free." A murmur rippled through the room. Rachel continued, her words growing stronger with each breath. "I was once part of something I thought was good, a mission to bring justice. But in chasing that mission, I lost myself. I hurt people. I carried guilt for years, believing God could never forgive me." She lifted her gaze toward the cross. "But I was wrong. I ran from my past, but grace ran faster." A soft gasp came from the crowd, then silence again, thick, reverent, holy. "I can't change what's been done," Rachel said, tears now freely rolling down her cheeks. "But I can tell you this, God never stopped chasing me. Even when I hid behind false names, behind fear, behind shame. He found me. Here. In this church. Through all of you." She looked toward Ethan, her voice breaking. "Through him." Ethan's throat tightened. He could barely breathe, his heart pounding with pride and tenderness. Rachel drew in a shaky breath, glancing back to the congregation. "If you see me now, don't see my sins. See what grace can do. Because if he can redeem someone like me, he can redeem anyone." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Pastor Caleb stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Rachel," he said softly, "you just preached the truest sermon this church has ever heard." The congregation rose slowly to their feet. Someone began clapping. Then another. Then all at once, the sound filled the sanctuary, applause mingled with tears, praise mingled with hope. The choir began to sing. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that saved a wretch like me," the word soared, echoing off the old rafters. Rachel turned to see faces she had once feared to meet, now softened, smiling, forgiving. Some wept openly. Others simply bowed their heads. Ethan stepped beside her as the congregation sang the second verse. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his hand finding hers, warm and steady. Rachel leaned closer, whispering through the music, "You found me when I was lost." Ethan turned, eyes glistening. "No, Rachel," he said quietly. "You showed me how to believe again." The choir swelled around them, the final verse lifting heavenward. "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. It was grace that brought me safe thus far. And grace will lead me home." As the last note lingered in the air, Rachel closed her eyes. The sound of it filled her, soft, endless, eternal. It was the sound of redemption. She had carried her past like a cross for so long. But beneath this one, the wooden cross above the altar, she finally laid it down. Later, as the congregation lingered to embrace and pray, Ethan and Rachel stepped outside. The morning had turned bright and clear. The wind carried the scent of lilies and fresh rain. Rachel looked toward the horizon, her voice tender. "Do you think it's really over?" Ethan slipped his arm around her shoulders. "The running?" "Yes." He smiled faintly. "But Grace? That story never ends." They stood there together, beneath the ringing bell, beneath the cross that now gleamed in the sun, symbols of all they had lost, and all they had found again. In that moment, they weren't fugitives or broken believers. They were simply two souls who had learned what love looks like when it walks hand in hand with faith. And as the light poured through the window, touching the cross atop the church steeple, the story that began in shadows ended in light. Thank you for listening. If you like this audio recording, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our audio recordings.